Madhava Kunjabi Hari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Yamuna Tiravana Chari Yamuna Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Yamuna Tiravana Chari Yamuna Tiravana Chari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Bol, Hare Bol, Hare Bol. Rantaraj Srimad-Bhagavatam Gaur Prema. Oh, good. Oh, good. Krishna Kshetra Swami Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami iti namine. Namaste Sarasvatī Gautamani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Ishatani Vancha Kalpataruryasya Kripa Sindhu Yasya Patratam Bhavayo Vaishnayo Namo He Krishna Karna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Tapta Kamsa Gaurami Radhe Vrindaneshwari Vishwaram Sudevi Pranami Haripriye Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vatsari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
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 Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaganarottama Deving Sarasvatīm Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashta Prayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. We're reading from Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 4, Ambarīṣa Mahārāja offended by Durvasa Muni. Text number 22. Śvamedhair adhiyajñam īśvaram. śvamedhair adhiyajñam īśvaram. mahā-vibhūtyopacitāṅga-dakṣiṇaiḥ. mahā-vibhūtyopacitāṅga-dakṣiṇaiḥ. tatair vasiṣṭhāsita-gautamādibhir. tatair vasiṣṭhāsita-gautamādibhir. dhanvany abhisrotam asau sarasvatīm. dhanvany abhisrotam asau sarasvatīm. Others.
śvamedhair adhiyajñam īśvaram. mahā-vibhūtyopacitaṅga-dakṣiṇaiḥ. tatair vasiṣṭhāsita-gautamādibhir. dhanvany abhisrotam asau sarasvatīm.
śvamedhair adhiyajñam īśvaram.
mahā-vibhūtyopacitaṅga-dakṣiṇaiḥ.
tatair vasiṣṭhāsita-gautamādibhir.
vasiṣṭhāsita-gautamādibhir.
dhanvany abhisrotam asau sarasvatīm.
dhanvany vishrotam asau sarasvatīm.
śvamedhair adhiyajñam īśvaram.
śvamedhair adhiyajñam īśvaram.
mahā-vibhūtyopacitāṅga-dakṣiṇaiḥ.
mahā-vibhūtyopacitāṅga-dakṣiṇaiḥ.
tatair vasiṣṭhāsita-gautamādibhir.
tatair vasiṣṭhāsita-gautamādibhir.
dhanvany abhisrotam asau sarasvatīm.
dhanvany abhisrotam asau sarasvatīm.
Please.
śvamedhair adhiyajñam īśvaram.
śvamedhair adhiyajñam īśvaram.
mahā-vibhūtyopacitāṅga-dakṣiṇaiḥ.
mahā-vibhūtyopacitāṅga-dakṣiṇaiḥ.
tatair vasiṣṭhāsita-gautamādibhir.
tatair vasiṣṭhāsita-gautamādibhir.
dhanvany abhisrotam asau sarasvatīm.
All right. EJ. Worshipped. Aśvamedhaiḥ.
Horse sacrifice.
By performing the horse sacrifice yajñas.
By performing the horse sacrifice yajñas.
Adhiyajñam. To satisfy the master of all yajñas. īśvaram. All of these. The Supreme Personality of Godhead.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead.
mahā-vibhūtyā. With great opulence. upacita-aṅga-dakṣiṇaiḥ. With all prescribed paraphernalia. And contributions of dakṣiṇā. To the brāhmaṇas. Tatair. Executed. vasiṣṭha-asita-gautama-ādibhiḥ. By such brāhmanas as vasiṣṭha, Asita, and dhanvany. In the desert. Abhisrotam. Inundated by the water of the river. Asau. Mahārāja Ambarīṣa. Sarasvatīm. On the bank of the Sarasvatī. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. In desert countries where there flowed the river Sarasvatī, Mahārāja Ambarīṣa performed great sacrifices like the aśvamedhaiḥ, and thus satisfied the masters of all yajñas, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such sacrifices were performed with great opulence and suitable paraphernalia, and with contributions of dakṣiṇā to the brāhmanas, who were supervised by great personalities like vasiṣṭha, Asita and Gautama, representing the king, the performer of the sacrifice. Purport. When one performs ritualistic sacrifices as prescribed in the Vedas, one needs expert brahmins known as yajñika brahmins. Yajñika. In Kali Yuga, however, there is a scarcity of such brahmins. Therefore, in Kali Yuga, the sacrifice recommended in Shastra is Sankirtan Yagya. Yagyai Sankirtana Prayai Yajanti Sumedasa. Instead of spending money unnecessarily on performing yajñas, impossible to perform in this age of Kali because of the scarcity of yajñika brāhmaṇas, one who is intelligent performs Sankirtan Yajña. Without properly performing yajñas to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there will be scarcity of rain. Yajñāt bhavati parjanya. Therefore, the performance of yajña is essential. Without yajña, there will be a scarcity of rain, and because of this scarcity, no food grains will be produced, and there will be famine. It is the duty of the king, therefore, to perform different types of yajñas, such as the aśvamedhaiḥ, to maintain the production of food grains. Annāt bhavanti bhūtāni. Without food grains, both men and animals will starve. Therefore, yajña is necessary for the state to perform, because by yajña, the people in general will be fed sumptuously. The brāhmanas and yajñika priests should be sufficiently paid for their expert service. This payment is called dakṣiṇā. Ambarīṣa Mahārāja, as the head of the state, performed all these yajñas through great personalities like Vasiṣṭha, Gautama, and Asita. Personally, however, he was engaged in devotional service, as mentioned before, Savaimana Krishna Padaravinda. The king, or head of state, must see that things go on well under proper guidance, and he must be an ideal devotee, as exemplified by Mahārāja Ambarīṣa. It is the duty of the king to see that food grains are produced. To this verse, I'll read the translation again. In desert countries where there flowed the river Sarasvatī, Mahārāja Ambarīṣa performed great sacrifices, like the aśvamedhaiḥ, and thus satisfied the master of all yajñas, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such sacrifices were performed with great opulence and suitable paraphernalia, and with contributions of dakṣiṇā to the brāhmanas, who were supervised by great personalities like vasiṣṭha, Asita and Gautama, representing the king, the performer of the sacrifices. This verse and several verses leading up to and continuing are setting the stage for events to come, which will be, you can say, the main reason that we hear about Ambarīṣa Mahārāja, and for which we celebrate him. Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport that he is a devotee, and therefore he engages in devotional service, and he engages all these brahmins in doing all these, what we sometimes in English call hocus pocus. All the rituals which they are qualified to do, and they're particularly qualified because they are guided. And how are they guided? They're guided by great sages, and we have some of them mentioned here. The suggestion is that there's, in a sense, two things going on here. There's ordinary religion in the form of the performance of sacrifices. And indeed, it has to be recognized that aśvamedha it's a sacrifice, and what sort of sacrifice? It's a blood sacrifice. It involves the slaughter of a horse, but actually in a standard aśvamedha, there are really quite many animals killed. According to one source, over 300 animals would be sacrificed in a proper, complete aśvamedha. Smaller animals, mostly, and then one horse. And so this is a bit shocking to us, but this is religion. How is this religion? Well, it involves a very developed, what we may call technology. And it's a technology which is very much lost in the present age. The technology, we understand, when it was properly performed, had a benefit, not only to the land, but also to the animals that were sacrificed. That seems to be no longer the case. And so there are processes of substitution, and Srila Prabhupada mentions, not in the context of substitution, but in a broader sense of benefiting everyone, the Sankirtan Yajna as our process of yajna. But back to our hero, King Ambarīṣa. He is sponsoring these sacrifices. Indeed, he pays for them, dakṣiṇā, and so they, which is essential if the king does not, or if the sponsor, the yajamana, does not properly remunerate those who are performing the yajna, then the yajna has no benefit for the yajamana. It's cancelled, basically. So the concluding ritual, the concluding rite of bestowing, of offering dakṣiṇā to the priest is really essential. Now, one can be a little skeptical here and say, well, who wrote those texts? It was the Brahmins, wasn't it? Yes, but be that as it may, still, there is a system, and that's how religion works. Religion, there are rules, and when the rules are followed, everyone is happy, everyone's satisfied. But above and beyond all of this, we can say, we can say that the aśvamedha and so on is included in Ambarīṣa's performing of devotional service, because in the verse it says, adhiyajñam īśvaram, the object of the sacrifice was adhiyajña, who is Īśvara, the Lord. So that's devotional service. But we also read before, Savai mana Krishna padara vrindayo vachansi vaikunta gunanu varnane karo harir mandiramarjanadishu shuting chakara chutas satkatodaye, etc., that Ambarīṣa is busy doing all sorts of things. And what does he start with? What's the first thing he does? The clue is in the first line of that verse. Savai mana Krishna padara. First thing he does is he places his mind at the lotus feet of Krishna. Yes. He engages his mind. So, yes, and then he goes on. What else does he do? He cleans the temple floor. He goes to the temple. He uses his feet to go to the temple. He uses his hands to clean the floor and so on. Clean the temple. And so many other activities, all very devotional. And then in a very devotional way, but also very much following rules, following the ritual process. What else does he do? He observes Ekadashi. And this is where the trouble starts. Because he's such a perfect observant of Ekadashi, he comes into a ritual dilemma. And what is the dilemma? He has to break the fast before a certain time. Devotees somehow get very caught up in this. We get very worried. Although we don't worry very much about when we chant Gayatri Mantra in the morning, noon, and evening, as a proper Smarta Brahman would be very concerned. Has to be just as the sun is coming over the horizon, halfway or whatever, and etc. We don't worry much about that. Bhaktivinoda Thakur tells us, don't worry about it so much. But somehow devotees get very worried about the exact time for breaking fast. Anyway, Ambarīṣa Maharaj was concerned to get it right, and now comes the problem, and the problem is Durvasa Muni, and we all know Durvasa Muni has this terrible temper, and if we cross him, who knows what's going to happen. He could cancel out all the benefit of doing this fast. And so, what to do? Oh, drinking water is both fasting and not fasting. Okay, so he drinks water. Durvasa decides to be very offended. Did he have to be offended? Nah. But he decides he's going to be offended, and so we know, or we will hear, what's going to happen. Now, we may say, and we often celebrate that Ambarīṣa Maharaj, we celebrate him as a person who is very tolerant. Which is interesting, because what does Ambarīṣa do when Durvasa sends this monster after him? He thinks of Krishna. What else does he do? Huh?
Stands before the
Yeah. Something else happens.
He accepts it.
Yeah. He has, maybe I misread this myself, but he has the control, the Sudarshan chakra, and he releases it. Or the Lord releases it through Ambarīṣa. In any case, whew, off goes Sudarshan, and that's when Durvasa gets chased by Sudarshan chakra. Right, so Ambarīṣa is very tolerant, and in his tolerance, the Sudarshan chakra goes after his adversary. Interesting. So I thought we could think a little more about this subject of tolerance, which came up on Sunday when we were discussing another celebrated figure of tolerance. Who was that? Yeah, Haridas Thakur. And there, at that discussion, the issue of how far should tolerance go be, because we think generally of tolerance as inaction. I just kind of hold my breath and I endure whatever is the situation. Shri Radha Gopinath ki jai. Between Sunday and today, I came across a very nice point about tolerance that I thought to share from His Holiness Radhanath Swami Mahārāja. He says, tolerance, what is tolerance? Tolerance is facing a negative situation with a positive attitude. I thought, that's really cool. That covers everything. Because it doesn't mean inaction, necessarily. It might mean, keeping quiet, keeping your sitting on your hands, or it might be doing something, it might be acting. And so it opens up a whole range of possibilities. So I also came across an interesting and I think helpful in this regard sort of discussion of humility by His Holiness Damodar Swami Maharaj, and I want to quote a little bit of that. In his blog, he gave 15 different points about humility, and this one is number 11, adhering to Dharma and accepting karma. Okay? So he says, karma, destiny, is what happens to us, and Dharma is the science of reacting appropriately. Both serve the cause of humility. He goes on to say, destiny loudly announces that we are not the control. If, in addition to hearing this humbling call, we accept and then experience our karma, our destiny, for what it is, Krishna's mercy. Our destiny is Krishna's mercy. We develop a mood of shelter and dependence. These feelings are the foundations of humility. Then he says, Dharma, the proper response to what destiny places before us, means to consciously choose what is right, not just what we like. This type of modest acceptance of an authority higher than our own whims and desires, this mark of character is practically the definition of humility. Does that make any sense? So he's saying Dharma is the proper response to karma. Karma is destiny. Destiny is actually Krishna's mercy. To act according to Dharma is to choose what is right. And that choosing of what is right has to do with accepting of authority higher than our own whims and desires. Yeah, and this is a mark of character, which he says is practically the definition of humility. Now at this point you may say, oh, so it all boils back down to authority. We have to accept authority. Yeah. And then, there we go again. These swamis are telling us you have to listen to authority. Well, but where's the ultimate authority? ultimate authority is Krishna. But where do we find Krishna? After we have heard from sadhus, after we have heard from Shastra, after we have heard from Guru, what do we have? We have the Lord in the heart. Yeah. So acting according to the Lord in the heart. And that brings us a sense also of, it brings us an attitude of gratitude, even in a negative situation. And an example of that is Vidura. Vidura never got along with Duryodhana. And at one point Duryodhana cut loose and just yelled at Vidura about how he was always siding with the Pandavas. And finally he can't hold himself back anymore. He says, "You should get out of here. What are you doing here anyway? Get out!" And Vidura grabs his staff, his danda, and he says, "Bye! I'm out of here." And Prabhupada explains, or it's in the verse, he was actually grateful to Duryodhana. He was grateful. And he didn't leave just for the afternoon. He left for 30 years. According to one source I read, it was 30 years he went on pilgrimage. When he comes back, of course, Duryodhana is dead, and practically everyone else is dead. Dhritarashtra is still somehow hanging on. But the point is that he is thankful to Duryodhana, and that gives him this positive attitude with which he can then tolerate all sorts of circumstances. Yeah, so that's very nice. Okay, I don't want to drag this on too much, but here's a definition of tolerance from the Oxford English Dictionary. I know we love Oxford English Dictionary definitions. The disposition to be patient with or indulgent to the opinions or practices of others. Freedom from bigotry or undue severity in judging the conduct of others. Can also mean forbearance or catholicity of spirit. What is catholicity of spirit? Nothing to do with the Catholic Church. Catholicity means inclusiveness, a broad-mindedness, we might say, something like that. Yeah. So let's see, so much more could be said about tolerance, all the way from how parents tolerate their own children. Why? Out of love. So the kids do all kinds of outrageous things, but the parents tolerate. Similarly, of course, Krishna tolerates us. We sometimes want to say, as we heard before, that's too much. Well, just consider how too much we are to Krishna sometimes. That's too much. But does Krishna ever say that's too much? No. He always says, okay, try again. And of course, Krishna, I mean, this is really our starting point in devotional service, is to think of Krishna's qualities, isn't it? So, 64 qualities of Krishna. One of them is forbearance, forbearing. Anyone happen to remember the example for Krishna's forbearance? Close, but not quite.
When he was kicked in his chest by Ram. When he was kicked in the chest by Ram, I forgot.
That's a nice example, but no, not that one. Not in Nectar Devotion.
In the forest with spiritual master?
Yes, that's it. Very good.
I
he was forbearing to the conditions that came in the forest when, well, not just in the forest, but Prabhupada said all the different tasks that the guru gives to the disciple is forbearing. And a specific example is when he goes to the forest and the rain comes and so on. Then forgiving is another example, and forgiving, who does Krishna forgive? We heard. Shishupala, yes. But he doesn't forgive him forever, does he? How many times? 100 times. I always like to think he had a 54, 55. And another one, which is very interesting, is impartiality. And the example here, anyone know what is the example, the illustration of Krishna's impartiality?
Rain falls.
Maybe with Duryodhana, when he asked Duryodhana to choose for him or the army.
These are both good examples, but they're not quite the one from Krishna.
Did he even liberate Putana who came to kill him?
That would also be good.
Maybe Ramachandra, when the brother of Ravana comes to surrender. When the brother of Ravana comes to surrender.
Oh.
And then he says that he would even accept Ravana if he came.
Also a good example, but no. Huh?
Battlefield.
I can't hear. Yes. On the battlefield. Okay. Okay, possibly, but no. Sorry. It's in his engagement with Kaliya. With Kaliya, yes. How is that? Because, and again, I think this is a nice example of tolerance, but it's not that Krishna said, okay, anyway, he's also a spirit soul and he has a right to, to poison the Yamuna river, and anyway, what to do, it's Krishna's mercy. Oh, that's me, I'm Krishna. And all the cows and the cowherd boys are dead. Anyway, what to do? I'll just think of it in a positive way. No, he goes out and attacks him. And in a very wonderful way, he attacks him. He has some good fun dancing on his heads, right? So much fun. And entertaining everyone who's watching, and also making them terrified, because first he's letting himself be strangled. But he is impartial to Kaliya because, for one thing, he lets him live in the end. And he lets him go. He says, okay, now it's time for you to go. And so it's live and let live, so to say, but go live somewhere. Go live somewhere else, please. and so he invites him to leave. So these are examples of tolerance. So we're constantly confronted with negative situations, negative people, negative circumstances. What to do with them? If we can face them with a positive attitude, which at the very least is, I don't know what to do in this situation, but Krishna is sending it to me. He's not sending it to somebody else, he's sending it to me. Or maybe he's sending it to all of us. What is Krishna's purpose behind this? Let's try to find out. And then seeing what is to be done. Always something to be done, even if that something is keeping quiet. But sometimes it means speaking up and saying something, right? Sometimes we might have to say something. This is not right. This situation is good, but it could be improved. And so on. We could expand Krishna consciousness so much more if, in addition to what we're doing, we could, like that, we can speak up. Hare Krishna, I will end there if there's a comment, a question, suggestion.
I would like, if you can, I didn't understand how is Krishna impartial to Kali.
How Krishna is impartial to Kali. Well, yeah, it is hard to see that because he is very strongly acting with him. Not only that, he plays with him, he dances, he punishes him. That chapter is called Punishment, what is it? Punishment of Kali? Damana punishment. I would say like this, just as a parent may punish his or her child, there's a certain impartiality there. Or if a parent has two children, there will be impartiality, and this may involve engaging with them in different ways, including a punishment. So, in that sense, Krishna is impartial. Partial, yeah, you could say he's impartial in a negative sense of, we don't care about you, Kaliya, because I really care about my friends. We might say in that sense impartial. There's two sides to impartial.
Kaliya, you said he was expressing some sense of regret.
Yeah.
So why send you away if you can change his mind?
Why did he send Kaliya away?
No, because of the wives.
Huh?
The wives of Kaliya were praying for him.
Yeah, but why else? I mean, why? What if he would let him stay there? There's a problem. He's a real polluter, just by breathing. He can't help it. He has to breathe.
Birds stop that.
So he has to breathe. Apparently his breathing meant death to other living entities. Okay, but not in Vrindavan. Vrindavan's my special playground. Yeah.
You said something towards the end, if there's a situation that we should try to find out what is the reason, should we be active or just sometimes we cannot figure it out, or later will be a revelation? You said it in a way like we should make some active endeavor to find out what is the reason why Krishna makes it like that?
It could be. My point was that our general attitude in difficult circumstance, negative, whatever it is, can be positive. If we start with a positive attitude, I'm preaching to myself, if we start with a positive attitude that, oh, Krishna may have something, some purpose here for me, let me see if I can realize what that is. So then you're saying, does that mean looking for why Krishna's doing something? Because it might be meaning that, but not necessarily. In other words, how far can we go to understand Krishna's mind? Krishna always has multiple purposes with everything. and we make the best of, also, as Prabhupada would say, we make the best use of bad bargain. But what I'm saying is, with a positive attitude, then we may get intelligence from Krishna what to do. Because what does Krishna say? Tesham satata yukta. If you're always engaged in service to me, then I'll give you buddhi yoga. Krishna speaks of buddhi yoga twice in the Bhagavad Gita. Did you know that we are practicing buddhi yoga? Not only bhakti yoga, but buddhi yoga. Prabhupada says buddhi yoga means bhakti yoga. Yeah. So, some action, sometimes we have to take responsibility and do something. Do the needful. Not just tolerate in the negative sense. I think my main point is tolerate doesn't just mean sitting on our hands. Tolerate can mean also being active, but being intelligently active.
You mentioned in the beginning that if the priests are not given a proper dakṣiṇā, then the sacrifice is not anymore.
Yeah.
Do you think that, maybe this is a loaded question, perhaps in our
Suddenly the priests come running out from the altar
From
and
the
say,
altar.
yes, therefore, you gotta pay us.
I think perhaps ISKCON is losing a lot of possible benefits by actually, in some temples, not taking care of the pujaris nicely. Because they're supposed to serve many hours a day in different conditions and suffering.
Yeah. These things have to be discussed.
How were the brāhmaṇas maintained in the days of yore?
The days of yore. They received dakṣiṇā, but apparently they received enough. And another point, though, is that in days of yore, Brahmins didn't have to pay, huge amounts of money just to have a shelter over their head. Now the economy has gone in such a way that people spend most of their time just paying for the roof over their heads. Isn't it? For most of their lives, right? You have to get a loan from the bank and you pay it back for 30 years. Just for the roof over your head. That's kind of crazy. So, difficult. Brahmins in modern times, I read an article some time ago of priests in the Sri Vaishnava tradition in South India who are employed in America in temples, and they get a salary which is quite substantial. I mean, they can live comfortably. They have their home, they have their car, they can go on vacation, all these things. And I don't know how it works, I'm sure it's sort of similar here in Europe, but in America, every minister or priest of the Protestant Christian tradition, pastor, minister, priest, they get their salary. The community of that church, they cover the costs of the priest or the minister or whatever. It's a certain amount. They kind of live like everyone else. They have their house and their car and their vacation for 2 weeks or whatever.
should not get salary or should not be in the situation of actually regular support.
Yes, that idea is also there. What do they get? They get dakṣiṇā.
Yeah, so there's difference.
So it's not that they're not paid. So yes, right. It's not that they get a set amount. They get a dakṣiṇā. But whether that works in a modern society where most people have to pay most of their whatever they get just for the roof over the head, and where they have children and so on, that's an issue. Some things sometimes might need to be adjusted. Yes.
You were explaining in the beginning also that in the time of Bali, in the time of Aswamedha, I guess there were around 300 animals being sacrificed. How do we explain it actually now? What were the benefits before, and maybe there are benefits now and we don't see it? How do you explain it?
Well, there are no benefits now because it's not prescribed for this age to do that. Therefore, Sankirtan Yagya, Yatra Sankirtane Naiva Sarvasvarto Hilavyate. In this age, it's Sankirtan. What were the benefits in earlier times? Prabhupada mentions here, Annad Bhavanti Bhutani Parjanyat Annasam Bhava. This cycle, Pravartitam Chakram, it's keeping the whole cosmic system going with the rain, with the grain, and so on. How is that maintained today? The claim, what Prabhupada is saying, is also yajna, but a different kind of yajna, Sankirtan yajna. Yeah, and in how many purports does Prabhupada make this point? It's there again and again. The idea why this killing of animals, the sacrificing of animals, that's a big topic, and it's very complicated. Sometime maybe I'll give a seminar on that. But it's also a bit depressing. So I don't know. And it was what Buddhism rejected. And Prabhupada explains, the Lord came as Buddha in order to, correct the excesses which were happening. And so it's quite possible that the text in which is mentioned, this one horse plus these 300 animals, it's quite possible that this text appears at a later time. It's not in the Rig Veda. It's one of the yajna, one of the texts, one of the technical texts. And when and how this appears. Okay. Thank you all very much. have a nice day today. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Grantaraj Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Gaur Prem.